Hi, this is Kelly Devine, and I'm on the road with Encounter. We are here today with Mrs. Sandy Scanlon, who is the granddaughter of local businessman, humanitarian, and family guy, George F. Johnson. Hi, Sandra. I am so glad you could meet with me today.
I'm so glad you came up to my home.
It's a pleasure to be here. It really is.
It's a pleasure to talk about my grandfather.
Yeah, your grandfather was loved by so many people. He was ahead of his time, I'm sure. That's my opinion. I'm sure it's shared by many, many people. I would like to know, how did your grandfather, he was a family man.
Yes.
Can you give me a little bit of history about his family in this area? Where they lived and how many kids he had? Maybe a little bit, tell me a little bit about him.
Okay, he was born in Massachusetts, and you knew how he came here. The telegram that went to his father, supposedly, to come and help Mr. Endicott had sent it, but the wires got mixed up. He got the telegram and ended up coming instead of his father. Mr. Endicott looked at him and said, I didn't hire you, just a boy. And he said, but I'm here now, and I have only 10 cents in my pocket.
How old was he then?
Oh dear, I'm afraid you'd ask that question.
You can give me a ballpark.
I can't remember how old he was. But what most people don't understand with him, his lack of education, as you know it today, Grandpa only he didn't even finish the 6th grade. And also, he had lost one eye. Most people don't know that. He was completely blind and they had a fake eye, a glass eye. And there's a story that goes with that with my brother and me. And he ran that company with one eye, and his mind was unbelievable. It was so sharp. He thought all the time to make things better for people. He loved everybody. His office down in Endicott, the door was never shut. Anybody could come in and talk to him. They had a problem, sit right down.
So you're saying he had time for everybody, always?
Always had time. Yep.
Well, I know he employed many people throughout the Triple Cities.
From many countries, though.
From many countries. Mm-hmm. Yep. Yeah, everybody wanted to know where EJ's was when they came here.
Which way EJ was the comment.
I still remember hearing that from relatives. I've actually had relatives that worked at EJ's throughout the year.
Yeah.
And I find it that no matter where you go, somebody in every single family that I know has worked at EJ's. Mm-hmm. That's pretty amazing. So your grandfather, he was a family man.
Yes, he was married to Mary Ann McGlone, little Irish girl. And they had just one child. Mm-hmm. My mother, and raised her in Endicott at the home, which is no longer, as you know, they tore it down. Mm-hmm. And he treated her as a boy, because that's what he wanted, really, was a boy. And he took her everywhere and introduced her to sports, because he was a great sportsman. Wrestling, football, you name it, basketball, it didn't make any difference. Wherever it was, he would take her. And her friend, Sydney Morse.
So your mom's name was Lillian?
Okay. Mm-hmm. Actually, it was Esther Lillian, because my grandmother got a little whimsical, and she was born on Easter Day.
Wow.
So, Easter Lily.
That's kind of cute.
Yeah. But she hated that. So, but she was always known as Lily.
So, did your mom learn about, did he actually teach her about the industry that his business?
Oh yes, she grew up with it. She was at the table and was asked many questions. She had to know everything. As a matter of fact, when she came downstairs in the morning for breakfast, she had to have read the morning paper and knew what was in it, because Grandpa would quiz her. He'd already been up at 5 o'clock and read the paper, of course. And if she didn't know it, she was excused from the table, sent upstairs to read it, and don't come back until you know it.
Well, that kind of shows me that he took a great interest and wanted her to in the community, because that everything that was going on, she needed to know.
Right.
And how that would affect business. Yes?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, definitely.
Well, your grandfather, as a family man, was he religious? Or did he support other people?
Yes, he supported all religions. My grandmother was a strict Catholic, and Grandpa went to church with her every Sunday or holy day, whatever it was.
That brings me to one of my favorite churches, a very large, very beautiful church. It's Sarah Jane Johnson Memorial United Methodist Church.
Yes.
Giant mouthful there. That is a large church. It's very beautiful. A lot of stained glass work, and it was named for who?
For my grandfather's mother. He and his brothers, his other brothers, he decided that they adored her so much and they wanted to keep her memory living, and so in her memory they built the church, put up the money for it.
It is such a beautiful thought.
And it's yes, I mean, you think today that are you going to build me a church? No, but that's the way it was back in those days.
Well, that brings me to Sarah Jane's their outreach program.
Yes.
And they have what's called the George F. Johnson Dream Center. And it impresses me because they've gone out, not only brought kids in off the streets, they have a tech program that teaches them, I think it's some technical stuff like computers and things like that, but they have a basketball program, they run 2 a year, and bringing kids together with maybe a little bit of a faith-based piece, and playing basketball, it gives them a place to be. And I think that kind of lives up to what your grandfather believed in, is giving people what they need. Sometimes I think we give people things and it's not necessarily what they need. You know, we don't like put our ear to the ground and listen to what people need.
Well, you said the right word. We give people things.
Yes.
You know, tangible things. Stuff, right.
Yeah.
And that isn't what they need necessarily.
Yeah.
They need something from the mind.
I know when his business was in full swing, they provided things for their workers, for their employees. He gave the original meaning of welfare, what it was truly supposed to mean. It was to help people, give them what they need, and help them get to the next place.
And they didn't take advantage of him for that.
What else did they have besides? They had a commissary, and they had a medical program.
Big medical hospital. Matter of fact, I went there as a child. My mother would take me there. Dr. Horton. I can still remember him. He lived in Johnson City, and he was just ever so delightful as doctors go.
But they never went out without medical care.
Never.
If they were sick,
if they couldn't, no, there wasn't like the insurance that you have today. You know, you have to have insurance, and if you don't, you pay.
But he felt that was a right. He felt that was important for people to be healthy so they could work and be happy.
And if they needed help, he was going to give it to them. And he had the money to do it.
Okay. Well, that brings me to one of my favorite movies is It's a Wonderful Life.
Oh, yes.
It is. It's actually, I watch it every year. And it kind of, in a way, I get a vision in my head of your grandfather. Because he truly believed that people should be able to live in some comfortable rooms with their family
That's
and
right.
spend time.
That's right.
So maybe you can tell me a little bit about what he did to make sure that people had a place to live.
Well, he would build the homes as you have seen them. I see them mostly over Riverside Drive. I know there's many more around, and they're very solidly built home.
So, Sandra, you must have some amazing stories about being the granddaughter of George F.
Yes.
You spent a lot of time with your grandpa?
I spent a whole lot of time with him, both in Florida and up here. And up here, he felt that I should get to know what was out there instead of just little kids, you know, playing with dolls and stuff. You got to learn something. So he took me to the plant one day, to the tannery. I don't know if you ever were around tanning process, but it is horrible smell. Absolutely horrible. And so he said, come on, we're going inside. You're going to see what the men are doing. And here were these huge vats of acid, which took the hair off the
hide.
The hides,
Yeah.
and it swirled around in this huge, well, it looked like a swimming pool actually. And then there was a board, a very small board that you walked across, and the men that were in it had great big paddles that they used to make sure that the hide was getting in the right place, you know, not just laying together. And Grandpa said, okay, you're gonna walk across here. And I said, so I started walking across. At that point, I put my hand up to my nose and never said a word. He turned around and caught me and said, young lady, take your hand away from your nose. That's your bread and butter. And yes, Grandpa.
He wanted you to have an appreciation
Yes,
for
he
what other
did,
people
for what
did.
other people did. Absolutely. And the men, the tanners, were humongous. They looked like wrestlers. They were so big. And of course, think about stirring
Lifting.
that hide and lifting. Oh my gosh, it was unbelievable. And of course, you know, when they went home, they had a separate part added on to their homes. They never were allowed to walk into the home. They had to strip down all their clothing and come into the house. So the wife would be there to hand them a towel or something and get right in the shower, in their bathtub, and clean up, get the smell off. And then she had to deal with washing those smelly clothes.
Yeah, different way of life completely.
Different, oh, completely. You worked hard. And then you prepared yourself. At night, you cleaned yourself up. The lady, the wife, would clean herself up and serve a lovely dinner that she'd been cooking probably all day long.
This is Kelly Devine with Encounter. In case you're just tuning in, we are here at the home of Mrs. Sandy Scanlon. We are talking about her grandfather, George F. Johnson. I heard, talking to your son a little earlier, a little story about why a lot of the homes don't have garages.
Grandpa didn't believe in what he called the Tin Lizzy.
Which was the car?
The car.
Oh.
Cars, the new cars that were coming out, and he just didn't like it. He liked horse and buggy the best. And he said that he would build them a chicken coop because they could grow the chickens and they could use the chickens for eggs and for the chicken soup or whatever they wanted, and it was much more productive than a garage. Than the car.
Well, there is that whole exercise thing with walking too, so.
Oh yes, oh he believed in that.
Yeah.
And he came home every noon for dinner. In those days, they always had dinner at noon and sat at a formal table. And then he'd get up from the table and he'd go into the music room where they had a player piano.
Oh, nice.
And he would lay on the couch and go fast asleep for half an hour, and had instructions with who the cook or the maid, whoever, make sure I only have a half an hour. And he rested from his day, got up, walked back to the plant, into his office, and went to work.
Wow.
Then the whistle would blow when it was all done at the end of the day. I can still remember hearing the whistle at 7 o'clock in the morning when they opened up. You know, it started, I think everybody in Endicott and Johnson City, their lives started at 7 o'clock in the morning when that whistle went off.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Definitely. I do sort of, I remember hearing stories from my grandparents and my parents, and it was a different way of life.
Oh, and
Completely.
it was simpler,
Yes.
needless to say. And I feel sorry, really, for the children of today. I'm glad they have the mechanical things, not always the texting, the phones and all. I don't believe in that completely. Somewhat, yes. But they need to get out. They need to read, which I think is so important. And so many kids, they don't read. They're not, what's reading? I'd rather play on my...
They need to take a part in their government and
Yep.
and what happens to today's world.
Well, they
as
need to
well.
understand it at least.
Yes.
If they don't take a part in it.
Yes.
Not everybody's a politician,
Right.
you know.
Sandra, besides churches and some businesses in the area, what are some of the other things that your grandfather facilitated, built in the area?
The carousels.
The carousels.
The 6 carousels.
Is there a
They were the
story?
largest collection of carousels in the country. Yes, there's a story. When he was a young man up in Massachusetts in school, the carousels would come to his town. And he, of course, always wanted to go, but he couldn't afford the 10 cents. So he snuck around the tent and crawled under. Then he said when he grew older, he kept it in his mind how much children should be able to see carousels and ride on them, that he was going to do something about that. So he said, I'm going to build carousels. And so then he had 6 of them built in this area, one at a time, a couple of which I've donated. The one at Ross Park did a wonderful thing one day. They gave donations for the horses, and they would use it for upkeep, because it's quite a bit of upkeep to keep those horses in good condition. And I donated one in my son's memory. So it's great up there, and I can remember going to the Ross Park as a little girl, and I loved it up there.
I've actually ridden them all.
Good.
Being the age
Good.
that I'm
Oh, you
at.
got the pin, did
Yes,
you?
and you go to each one. That is a pretty amazing feeling, and
Yes.
I think for you to tell people why it's so important to the area and what his thinking was is really important too. So,
I think it's very important for children to get away from the electronics, and they're on a horse that goes up and down, and of course wonderful music, and it puts them in a different mental outlook on life, I think. And if you watch their faces, which I've done on all of them, they're smiling and they're waving to their friends, and they're so cute. The one that I rededicated was the one on up in Endicott. That's the smallest one, I think. Yeah, I think that's the smallest.
is that on the north side?
North
part?
side of, yep. And it was just so impressive, and they had 10 original riders there that day. The ladies, and I think there were a couple of men, and I talked to all of them, and we all got to ride on the carousel. And it just, to me, that was so impressive to see these ladies with canes as I walk with myself, enjoying, remembering their childhood there at the park. And of course some of them lived like just across the street. And it just was, to me, so impressive. And I'm so glad that they still keep them going.
It's kind of neat how no matter who you are, how old you are, everybody is the same when you're on a carousel horse.
Exactly, exactly.
That's pretty
And
cool.
these little children, some of them are very young and don't understand it, but some of the older ones, and they wave to their buddy outside on the fence, you know, and it just fills them.
It's a joy.
Yeah, with joy.
Yeah, in a day and age when we focus on so many dark things
I know,
happening,
I know.
joy is, you
Yeah,
gotta take it where you
I
can get
think
it.
everybody should go for a ride on the carousels.
I love that. I may have to do that this weekend. There were parks. He did a lot with parks. I know there were, they used to have parks that had bands and all sorts of
Yep.
things and schools, and he just really,
Well, the one down in Endicott they had every Sunday night, they had a band, the EJ band
right?
played. And you remember the pool?
I
down there?
don't, but I've seen lots of
I
pictures.
swam in it.
You swam
Oh
in
my
it?
gosh. That one and the one in JC, which was the biggest one, I think, in the country at the time.
Yeah.
And it was unbelievable. And of course, I just broke my heart when they had to tear them down. Understandably, you know, they were cracking, but those were great. And to think how, sorry?
The golf course.
Oh, the golf course.
The golf
Yeah.
course.
Enjoy.
In it, Enjoy was for, he felt that the workers should be able to get out there and just forget their work and play. And that's why he had the golf course built for them.
Awesome. It just seems like Endicott, Johnson City, Binghamton, that whole area, wherever Endicott-Johnson's reach was, it just seemed like a little utopia. It seemed like you could raise a family, you could make a decent wage, you could have a decent place to live, and it's the epitome of the American dream.
Yes,
It really is.
It is. I've got to tell you one quick funny story. Every day when I visited Grandpa and Grandma, I was made to take a nap. That was the way Mother and Father brought me up. So I had to go up to the 3rd floor of his home and take a nap. Well, on the way up the stairs, I see something with a piece of paper over it in the corner of the stairwell. And I'm thinking, what the heck is that? So I figured, well, when the maid had gone downstairs and made sure I was tucked away in bed, I quickly got out of bed and went over to check it, lifted up this paper, and there was a button there. Well, now, if you were a child, what would you do? Push the button?
Probably.
I did.
And how old were you?
I probably was about 7,
Okay.
maybe 8. And I pushed that button and then dropped it and ran like the dickens, jumped back into bed and pretended to be asleep because I could hear people coming up the stairs. Well, the next thing I looked up, here's this huge fireman standing in my door of my bedroom, of course with a maid, because the maid never went in the room of a young girl. And do you realize what you did? I said, no, sir. He said, that is your grandfather's fire alarm, and we are here immediately when it comes over. Whoa, whoa, whoa.
That could get you in some trouble.
Oh, I got in a bit of trouble, but he was cute about it because we had going to dinner that day. He looked at me and I thought, oh, here it comes. I just thought, I'm going to get it. And he never said a word. Never said a word because he knew it was bothering me so. He figured I had enough pain without him saying something. Except, you'll never do that again, will you?
I would like to thank our audience, TV and radio, for joining us today as we've talked to Mrs. Sandra Scanlon. And Sandra, I would really like to thank you for allowing us to come to your beautiful home.
Oh,
showing
thank
us
you
all your
so
cool
much.
George F. Johnson-y things.
This week on Encounter, Kelly Devine has been speaking with the granddaughter of George F. Johnson, Sandy Scanlon. We traveled to her home in Windsor and recorded the program on a hot August afternoon, thus the sound of some cooling fans throughout the program today. George Francis Johnson was born in Milford, Massachusetts in 1857, and in 1881, after 10 years of experience in the shoe and boot-making industry in his home state, he moved to Binghamton to work in a large shoe factory, and within 9 years, he was running a new plant in what was then called Leicestershire, now Johnson City. In 1899, George F. joined with Henry B. Endicott, forming the Endicott-Johnson Company. With Johnson's leadership, the company grew to 8 factories in Broome County, employing about 10,000 workers. EJ, as the company became known locally, was the first company in the shoe industry to introduce the 8-hour workday, the 40-hour work week, and comprehensive medical care. They paid some high wages in the industry, but Endicott-Johnson was consistently profitable. With a workforce that included thousands of immigrants from Europe, Johnson developed residential neighborhoods in Endicott and in the village that now bears his name, Johnson City, selling the houses to workers at a cost to himself of about $1,000 each. Johnson saw to it that Endicott-Johnson employees received a range of benefits that weren't typically offered by most employers at the time. The company created parks, medical facilities, restaurants, libraries, recreational facilities, and helped build some churches, all designed to provide high-quality goods and services to the employees for free. Our thanks to Sandy Scanlon for her hospitality, and our thanks to you for joining us for Encounter, produced in cooperation with the Broome County Council of Churches.